Why are weak men such a problem?
Well, weak people are a problem. And I don't mean physically weak. I mean cowardly, let's say, and deceitful, because I'm thinking it more in terms of moral weakness. Well, there's a variety of reasons. First of all, if you can't support your own weight, let's say, then someone else has to do it. And that's not good. And then if you don't pick a forthright and useful and noble pathway through life, then you'll become bitter and too hurt by the tragedy of existence. And then you tend to seek your revenge wherever you can get it. And that's not good. So it's a mistake on all fronts. It's not good for you. It's not good for your family. It's not good for the community. It's certainly not a good medium to long-term strategy because life is very, very difficult and you have to be prepared for that.
That was a strong point.
I feel like I largely agree that, like, at the end of the day, even if you have a partner, there comes a point where if you're not taking care of yourself, then people are going to not do it for you, or you will become a burden.
Yeah. I think people's patience is very ending. It can run out quickly. Most people have a lot of patience at first when you like talk to them, hey, I'm not feeling good, I'm struggling, whatever. Like you can really open up and be vulnerable with people. But then after a while, it just becomes too much for the other person. And
definitely,
every human being is still at the end of the day, like they're primarily focused on getting ahead themselves, you know, in life. And of course, there are families that are there for you and all kinds of people that love you and will be there for you. You have to not bank on that, I feel. You have to be able to do it yourself and then expect that if push comes to shove, that people are there if like you're in an extreme situation and really need help. And that can be in a lot of situations, like that can be in a marriage, that can be in friendships, that can be with your parents.
Yeah, and like you can't resent them. I think that's a big point that he said is like, I think a lot of people when they get into that responsibility, they feel like inherently if somebody doesn't do everything with them or stick with them forever, that person is somehow an a-hole. But I just think, like you said, like it's human nature. We can't think outside ourselves all the time. Right. And so if you have that expectation, you're going to feel bitter. So like you also have to come to terms with like, they can help me to a certain degree, but like I shouldn't feel bad if they can't. It doesn't make them necessarily a bad person.
Right.
There was some quote I saw that was like, if you tell somebody you have cancer, they feel bad for you. If it's like a friend, but for a lot of people, if you're like, make them take care of your cancer journey the whole time, then it becomes really hard on somebody. And I think they can't do that.
Yeah, isn't that funny in life? Like if you tell someone the first time I have cancer, there's like tremendous empathy and like, I'm so sorry you have to go through this and so on. If you tell them 100 times, they're going to resent you for it.
Yeah, totally. Even though you have fucking cancer.
Yeah. Such an annoying dying person. I find it sometimes really hard to come to terms with that fact that we only have so much compassion to expect from others, you know, and like, other than that, life is hard and we have to be like strong ourselves.
Yeah.
Like I find that sometimes hard to deal with. Like that triggers a little bit of a Weltschmerz in me.
What's
like
that?
That's kind of like, it's a German word for pain of dealing with life.
Okay.
Basically.
I guess I always wonder why it's such a challenge for people to give so much. Like I agree, I understand it and that people can't, but why is it so hard for us to be that generous? Is there a way for us to be less exhausted by that? I don't want to be cocky, but I feel like I have a pretty high threshold for that. Like, I feel like when I've been with sick people, I've written about this and they're on their deathbed. I've seen their friends for 40 years bail, but it doesn't really take that much out of me to spend 2 days with somebody and really defer my interests.
Right.
But I think it's quite hard for people to defer their interests for any extended amount of time. Not saying I'm perfect, but I agree. I think there's probably a middle ground of like, maybe the answer is people should understand that they can derive meaning and purpose from that. Like it always feels like a burden that I'm taking care of somebody because it's like, oh, I'm losing out on me or whatever. But I think that experience can teach you a lot about yourself and can help you grow. So maybe they got to see the value in also being there for somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's a great way maybe to have a little bit more patience there.
Yeah.
I also mean though in a more general sense. Okay, so you know, for example, a person is dying and they have like 2 years to live or whatever.
Yeah.
Now, if you spend 2 years just caring for them, being next to them, whatever, like at some point, I think you'd feel like you're losing yourself.
Yes.
So I find it sometimes hard to deal with that pain of that is how life is. You know, we can't change that fact. We can't change that we feel shitty or in general, we don't see it as worthwhile to stay with someone who is doomed. Basically.
Yeah.
Like there's only so much time we can spend with them before it feels like, oh, but we are dying in the process as well.
Yeah, sure. And you see that with like people who leave their partners that get terminal illnesses after a long time.
Yeah.
And even though they say they love them, there always hits that wall.
Totally. Totally. Yeah, I guess that's just what we have to accept in life. It's, you know, or if a loved one dies, of course you can mourn that death for a long time, but it doesn't really help you. It doesn't help the dead person, it doesn't help you.
Sure.
So in theory, like what's logical would be to get up back on your feet immediately as soon as possible and start living life to the fullest again.
Yeah, sure.
But then again, there needs to be this period where you can be like with them in mind, where you can mourn them, where you can be sad and so on. You know what I mean? Like I find it difficult sometimes in life to deal with that fact that like that has to end. That period.
Like both things
we
have to be there.
Move on and forget.
Maybe it's understanding that the person that you're doing it for probably wants that for you too eventually. Like if they can think outside themselves, I think somebody who cares about you is like, hey, I need you for a while, but I understand that it can't be forever. And you're saying, I can defer for a while and get a lot of value and take my time, but then I also eventually got to focus a little bit on myself. And there's a mutual kind of compassionate understanding. It's like, it's not necessarily a dickhead thing. It's what we can offer.
Totally. And I think that understanding often is derived from knowing that the other person can't linger on here too long.
Yes.
You know, like the dying person also wants the other person to move on, but not just because they want them to leave the hospital bed.
Yeah.
Like, but because they know that it won't do anything good for their future.
Them. Totally. Yeah. I mean, the answer is always more communication, right? Like.
Totally, yeah. I think that between those people, that is probably really important. One other thing that I feel is really important and that has certainly helped me was, I think that crying and giving yourself space to let these emotions appear and to just, you know, go into complete whatever sadness and just experience that emotion for a while. Because I also feel that same principle is true for ourselves and how we experience emotions. We ourselves get sick and tired of feeling sad, of feeling shitty.
Yeah, sure.
And so maybe we have to allow that time until we ourselves want to get out of that state again. It just sucks sometimes because people, when they're in a really bad place, they don't want to get out of it anymore.
Yeah, sure. And you're saying to experience these full range of emotions both with the other person and alone?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Like I like what you said with talking to them about it and stuff. I think that can really ease the pain. But then also allowing yourself to have these moments where you're really sad.
I think I agree. It's important to grieve. I think the hardest part is to know how long. Because I do think even grieving, like you can't just turn off the grieving gene. But like there comes a point where when you're grieving for 5 years, it is seriously destroying your life, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, it's tough to find that exact balance. And like you said, that moment when it's enough, when it's time to stop.
Maybe the simplest one that has worked for a lot of us is you reaching out to somebody else at that point. Maybe if you can't do it, finding some group, finding some peer group, a grieving group, another friend, therapist and stuff like that.
Totally. I think an outside opinion at that point is really helpful to tell you like, no, you deserve now to get back and be happy again.